Hi everyone, I'm back with another Diablo 4 video, and today I want to talk about the Overpower mechanic. So this is a quite interesting feature of Diablo 4 combat. It's available to all classes, to all builds. It's kind of like a base combat mechanic, similar to, for example, critical strikes. So this is something that's very common in RPGs. It's back here as well. But on top of this, there's this Overpower. And we don't know all the details about it, but I can explain it to you a little bit what it does and where it comes from and how we think it works. So you just saw one here, in fact. So you see sometimes these teal numbers in combat. There's one of them. And this is an Overpower hit. So pay attention to this. And also if you see orange numbers, those are Overpower crits. So what you need to know about Overpower is that this is a flat random chance. It's a 3% unscalable chance to proc Overpower attacks. And this kind of like increases your damage by a substantial amount, in fact. I'll show you an actual number example in a second. But essentially this allows you to kind of have these like, really big impactful hits and kind of turn the battle or turn the combat around in like one hit, basically. I think this is something that they have introduced into Diablo 4 as kind of a like RPG mechanic, with, for example, the roots going back to, let's say, Dungeons and Dragons, where you had like these critical rolls, for example, and could like instantly kill an enemy or so. And I guess this is somewhere going in that direction, basically, with this Overpower mechanic. So you can't scale it, like, for example, critical hit chance. You can, reach really high chance to crit in this game with, legendary aspects, with investment from your passive tree or from your skill tree, and with the right rolls on your items. But you cannot change this Overpower value. There are certain effects, especially in Barbarian, that actually interact with Overpower in some way. But outside of that, it's kind of just like a bonus damage that happens from time to time. And this number can be very substantial, as you can see here. So, for example, a skill that otherwise hits for a few hundred can overpower for like 3,000 or something like that. Here's also another example of the Invigorating Strike. So you're going to see this in a second. This is the left-click attack. It's just like a basic hit. This is what's happening right now. This 850, 1900, and then here comes the Overpower 2600, and then 900. So you can see that these numbers are actually fairly big compared to the regular hits. So going from like 700 to like 2,500 with like basic attack that doesn't cost anything is actually pretty good in this case. You see that the monster basically almost dies from this Overpower hit. And the value of Overpower is actually not determined by your real like damage, like for example weapon damage or any kind of multipliers, but by your life. So the tooltip says, I believe, something like it's the sum of your life and fortified life, and that kind of gets added to the value of the hit. Now we don't know exactly if this is like going to be like after all other multipliers have been applied or before. So if you can like really like multiply this huge Overpower hit and produce some really big hit eventually. But you can see that you can do massively more damage, at the very least, when you don't have many like impactful damage multipliers in your build. So especially in the early leveling, I guess. And you might see how important this Overpower mechanic is gonna be in the end game. But for example, this character here, this is level 40 rogue. This is not my rogue, and I don't know exactly what they had. But I would assume this has something like 1k HP or so. And you see that, the regular like basic attack hit is like 700, 800 or something like that. So you have plus 1000 damage for the Overpower, and then maybe some other extra value. For example, there's Overpower damage as a stat. So this can roll, for example, on your weapons. You can have like plus 30% Overpower damage here and plus 40% Overpower damage there. And then, of course, you can get even more lucky and actually crit on that Overpower and then multiply all that damage from your extra life and then this Overpower bonus that you have on your items. And the critical strike damage to have like some insane hit and do like, for example, in this case, maybe like a 5k hit or something like that. So this can definitely get pretty crazy. And it's going to be kind of interesting to see if this is going to be like really relevant in the overall combat. I guess especially for like very slow and hard hitting builds, this might be very impactful. Or for example, in PvP, I imagine that there could be these scenarios where you get like a really big hit or even multiple in a row and just completely destroy your opponent. So you might see some really funny clips of that. And as I mentioned, there are also some examples of skills that actually interact with Overpower. So you can see this here on the Barbarian overview, which I'm also going to talk more in detail at some point. But there are at least 4 mentions here that we have from the skill tree itself. And there's probably going to be more like in Paragons, in Legendaries, etc. Especially for the Barbarian, I could imagine this is some kind of like mechanic. I haven't seen this, for example, on Sorcerer or Rogue. So it seems like there is a bit of a theme for a class to go with this or that, for example. And you see here that, for example, Bash is one of the basic skills on the Barb and has an upgrade where after critting 4 times with a 2-handed weapon, your next core or weapon mastery skill will overpower. So, for example, there might be like a counter, and you can use this, on demand, so to say, and have a guaranteed overpower and do like a really big engage and like some big crit, and potentially combine this with other big multipliers. For example, damage to stunned enemies. So you could go in and do a ground stomp to stun them, and then have like plus 50% multiplier from that, and then do the overpower on top of it, and these kind of things. So there might be like this kind of like tactical moment-to-moment gameplay that you can do with these kind of effects. Here's another one on Hammer of the Ancients. So after overpowering with Hammer of the Ancients, which is a core skill, which does synergize with the one we just saw from Bash, you can get the guaranteed overpower, and then you get this bonus here. You deal 30% more damage for 2.5 seconds. So you can just like, hammer away for a few moments and completely annihilate enemies before you run out of resources. And there's, for example, other like a passive here. Overpower deals up to 45% more damage with a 2-handed weapon. So you can get those really big chunky hits with that. And lastly, overpower damage is also not just a stat that you can roll on your weapons, but also that you gain from willpower, which is one of the main attributes. So I believe that's the same for all classes. Just swaps around a little bit depending on what you're playing. But overpower damage can also be boosted here. It's generally not really something that I felt was worth investing into because of the really low chance. But this comes mostly from a rogue perspective. And as I mentioned, there are these examples here on the Barb where you can synergize with this overpower and have some kind of build around it. And there's definitely going to be more effects that we're going to find that go in that direction, I'm sure. In any case, it's a quite interesting combat feature in Diablo 4, so I wanted to highlight this. Hope you enjoyed this video here, and I'll see you guys next time.